Hello and welcome to the Powerful Personal Brand Podcast. I am your host, Claire Bahn, and on today's episode, I am very excited to be joined by Allen Adamson, an expert in all things branding. He has worked with a broad spectrum of consumer, corporate businesses in industries ranging from packaged goods and technology to healthcare, financial services, hospitality, and entertainment. Allen's newest book, Seeing the How, Achieving Market Advantage by Transforming the Stuff We Do, Not the Stuff We Buy, was published in May of 2023. And it focuses on the consumer experience as a competitive advantage and how this change in perspective has allowed companies to achieve dramatic growth and a categorical leadership. Allen, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Thanks for inviting me, Claire.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. After that introduction, I should probably just end it here because it's all
do a little tap
downhill.
dance, some jazz hands, Yeah,
and I'm done.
Exactly.
Exactly. Thank you very much for that.
You are welcome. So, one of the things that you mentioned is that you're one of the things that you talk about is the end of personal branding. And it, tell me more because, I love kind of things like that. Tell me why you think we're at the end of personal branding.
Well, let me rewind a bit and just do some level setting, because one of the things about marketing and branding is everyone makes up their own terms and they throw more and more jargon in. So let's just do a little level setting and say, for me, a brand is the story you want to get in someone's head. What do you want this person to remember? What idea do you want to get? If why is this toothpaste better, or why are you a better candidate for this position? Branding is how you get your story from your head into their head. And branding could be your LinkedIn page. Branding could be what you say, your message. Branding could be how you look and how you dress. And in the real world, branding is an influencer. There are 100 ways to do branding. And so one of the things is, what's wrong with personal branding is it is focused on branding. It's focusing on just getting your story out. And lots of personal branding things talk about how to get more visibility, how do you build your social media, how do you get more people to click on you. They're all on the branding side of how do you spin your story? How do you, and in today's world, there's no simple way to do branding. There's so much clutter, but you have to at least start with, do you have a good story to tell? Because if you don't have a good story to tell, you'll spend all your time focused on, do I have the right LinkedIn stuff? Do I need a better LinkedIn picture? Am I posting enough on Instagram to get noticed? Right. And you'll be totally consumed in the world of, branding. But if somebody sees that story, it's like, oh, who cares? So most people are totally focused on, to be successful in getting a job, I have to, scream louder and say, look at me. And yes, you do. It's much harder to break through. But if that's your focus, the best brands have a really powerful story that once you hear it, you want to buy them, you want to do business with them, you want to engage with them. So they understand that, you buy Crest toothpaste because they got the perfect, precise message, not because they're great at TikTok.
I think that's so true. I actually just recorded a podcast recently where we were talking about kind of somehow because personal branding is so different than a corporate brand. A corporation, unless it's the people involved, they don't really care. They don't have it's not they're not so invested, because a personal brand, people are so invested. They have such an idea of what should be, how they should be perceived, how they should talk, how they should. I mean, do you have any kind of advice for that? Because I feel like that people stand in the way often of getting an interesting message out there, because they're like, no, I want to talk about this, and well, no one cares.
Well, the first rule of a great brand strategy, brand story, is that if it's not really simple and clear, FedEx about absolute, forget about the branding, because and that's the first mistake people make. I want to tell you 20 things about myself. I've got to tell you that I went to this school, I have this MBA, I increased sales, and their head is exploding with 15,000 product facts or facts about why you're the perfect candidate. And best marketers know that the ads of breakthrough on the Super Bowl are not listing the 20 reasons you should buy Crest. They figured out the exact one, and same for companies. And so the first job is the hardest one, which is to say, there are 100 things you can say about yourself. how do you what's the relevant differentiation as we say in the business, what's the
Yeah.
one story, and the simpler the story is, the better job you can do getting it out, because the
Yeah.
best ads tell you. There's a famous Geico commercial which has a family eating at a table, and the voice says, we don't have to interrupt your viewing because this ad's already over, and then the dog starts eating the stuff from the table because they able to. There are 100 things you could say about Geico. It's owned by Warren Buffett. They have trailer insurance, but they realized they had to get that 50% in 15 minutes across.
Yeah.
So just like that, the hardest thing is to figure out, what if I had 8 seconds to tell somebody something about me? What's the right story? Forgetting
Hmm.
about how you tell it for now, but
Hmm.
simplicity is required to cut through to tell a story great.
Yeah.
Um, and it's the same with their PowerPoint, their LinkedIn. They just throwing so much stuff against the wall, hoping something will stick.
And something I always say is your personal brand and branding and marketing isn't for you. It isn't to make sure you get all the information and be like, oh, I really want them to think I'm smart. It's sometimes people will think you're smarter if you say less. Number one, there's stats that back that up. But your personal brand isn't for you. It's like you're saying, get your message across so people understand you're the one for this. You're the right person for that, or they should bring you this opportunity. But if you're constantly stuck in like listing all these things, or you never get to the point, everyone's going to be like, no one's going to be watching anything that you do
Right,
anyway.
right. So there's too much stuff trying to go through the funnel,
Yeah.
and they need to realize that the average person now has 10 seconds of attention before they're glancing down at their phone to check their email while you're talking,
Yeah.
and you know talk less, listen more. I think
Right.
the line from Hamilton really should apply to interviewing,
It's
because yeah,
It's so true.
uh,
Yeah. I mean, with so many things that we can learn. Well, not only that, but I think people that learn, right? They want to learn, and you can only learn and improve yourself if you stop. If you listen to feedback, if you figure out how you can improve on something, if you're constantly chattering and talking and throwing things, like you're never going to figure
yeah,
out what's working because you're not paying any attention.
yeah. And males are particularly worse at this than females. When I interview candidates, male candidates tend to want to impress me with how much they can jam into a conversation,
Interesting.
and their listening skills are often the first thing I say. Well, they're pretty good at talking, but I want them to listen to what you know we all think, and then help us
Yeah.
think better, not just to you know razzle dazzle me with words.
Right. Yeah, it's not going to help anyone. So, like, oftentimes we work with CEOs, like CMOs will come to us and we work with the CEOs to brand them. But there's a lot of times in the corporate marketing and branding world, there is confusion on the difference between a brand for a CEO and a person and the brand for the business. What are your thoughts on that?
You're selling yourself, so it has to be 70% you, and
Hmm.
you have to do it in the context that's relevant. So as you pick your story, you don't always go out with the exact same story, but it's better if you stay pretty close to that, because if you're telling an authentic story, you're going to get better at telling it. We'll talk about that in a second. And if you're switching your story every time you interview, it's like going on the stage and reading a different script
Hmm.
without. And so it has to be relevant, but you are selling your skill set. And most companies, there's more similarity. I've had the privilege of working across software and technology and healthcare. And while there are huge differences in the category, how those companies operate are more similar than different.
Hmm.
Yeah, sometimes you can't apply what you do for a pharma company to what you do for a potato chip company, but
Right.
the principles apply. And so you're going to get hired because somebody wants you on their team, not because you know more about the corporation than they do.
So your thought, like as far as the CEO is concerned, should they be super salesy? Do you think that's a good winning strategy?
No, because the one thing about a CEO is that you're going to be charting this ship, the captain of the ship,
Yeah.
uh, and most times people are looking for CEO. It's not clear sailing. There are
Hmm.
lots of winds, and you need somebody who's going to be able to call a play on the field.
Hmm.
Be flexible, be intuitive, and if they're all focused on a singular story, they're not showing the ability to read the room and
Yeah.
understand what has to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just, thinking about like, I think probably, well, the first celebrity CEO that I really can think of is Steve Jobs. And he never sold really anything, but he would show you, like when he released the iPhone and some of these other things, it was just the way he would talk about it, the way he would show it, the
He was a
way that,
storyteller, right?
yes. Yeah. So I think that
Uh,
that storytelling is so important. And I think a lot of times the corporations can forget that. I think they go back into
right.
like, I don't know, 1990s marketing or something. They're like,
Yeah.
buy this thing, buy this thing. And you're like, not working.
Yeah, and one of the challenges I've had with CEOs, because the flip side is, yes, we can talk a little bit of the story. It has to be simple. It has to be authentic to you, and you
Hmm.
have to deliver it in the story. You just can't say I'm hardworking and ambitious, and
Right.
I can make you a lot of money. You just and so there's a great tendency just to list the facts, but
Yeah.
getting people to know who you are, what you're going to be like, and how you're going to energize the company and inspire the workforce, because the main
Hmm.
job of a CEO is not to always figure out the right answer, but
Hmm.
to turbocharge the team to get
Yeah.
everyone's head in the game. And
Right.
no one wants to work for somebody who's just saying we need to increase sales for 12%. And here's why, because the quarterly,
Yeah.
if they're just giving you the facts why you have to run faster, you're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
going to, so they have to be internally, it's inside out. Their power is unleashed when they can get everyone around them to make them look good.
Yeah.
But one of the things I found because I work with a lot of CEOs, and within our world, I pitched with CEOs for large agencies. And the biggest challenge I find is, we go in, we're rehearsing for this big pitch, and everyone's got their role. We go through the slides, but typically, a lot of the CEOs I work with said, "Oh, I'll just do it." They don't want to
Mm.
rehearse. They don't want,
Yes.
they just show up at the last minute and they do their canned thing. And any job you go for, it's like you're going for a Broadway audition. This is the cream of the crop. There's no one coming through that door that's going
Hmm.
to, trip on the 4 yard line. They're all going to be great. And so your story is important, but if you can't deliver that story, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so a Super Bowl ad caught me this year that Google ran, and it was about a guy interviewing for a job. I'm sure many
Okay.
people saw it, and he was rehearsing with Google AI product.
Okay.
And so the phone said, "So tell me about the toughest challenge you had." And the way most people say, "Well, we were down 12% in sales, and 4 people have quit." They'll just go right. And this guy flipped to, of course, where it was an ad to talk about challenges he had being a dad for 3 kids and the juggling
Mm.
and the late nights. But he took his skill set and he embedded in a story that was riveting. Yes, that was
Yes.
for an ad, but that's sort of what you have to do. You have to know, what do I want to get across,
Right.
and then tell a story. And to your point about Steve Jobs, there's so much jargon. I enhanced, I optimized, people are throwing you adjectives,
Hmm.
but you get back to the way you sell products. You never say, oh, this cleans 20% better. You just, hey, look at
Right.
this shirt, look at this shirt. You have to
Yeah.
show people. And the way you show people is, let me tell you a story about what happened when I was at a job uh, 5 years ago.
Right.
And you tell them what happened and what you did. It's far more involving and interesting than saying, I solved the problem, we increased sales 4%.
Hmm.
Get away from the facts and tie it to a story.
But the other thing, like, so I was, connected to a lot of people on like this on social media, and there was somebody that was basically like, I'm so excited because we won this award or we did this thing, and so I was thinking to myself, like, how could he have spun this to be interesting?
Yeah.
Could you, imagine telling my 10-year-old self that I would be the CEO of a company and we would won this prestigious award, and then he could go through a story, like what you're talking about, like we were, these numbers were down, how are we going to figure it out? So there's the problem, but then here you could solve it by saying, we pulled the team together, everyone, it was a team effort. So again, bringing the team in, because that helps again with recruiting, retention, things like that. I just think there's a whole, it's just really changing the way you think about what
Right.
you're
And
what you're doing. Yeah.
obviously flip from I to we. Lots of people I interview,
Yes.
I did this, I did this. I'm more
Yes.
interested, if I'm hiring a leader, of saying, what did we do? What did our
Mhm.
team do? What did our team deliver? How do we unlock that energy it's hard. when you're to stay in touch when you're a CEO, because it
Right.
is a lot about what you do. But the best CEOs are leading from behind. They're good, great coaches more
Yeah.
than, putting the flag down and say, we need to take the island.
Right. Well, and so one thing I want to just say, because I feel like one of the things that keeps coming up is like, when there are CEOs looking for a new job. So someone might be saying, but I'm not looking for a new job, so I don't need to listen to this. Hold on. No. This this is a way we tell a story, because you're telling who you are, about your brand, what makes you tick, what you've done for the company, and it can help bring opportunities. Maybe in 10 years you want a job, but let's lay the foundation. What are your thoughts?
Well, I do a lot of, one of the best parts of this chapter in my career is I do a lot of speaking at business schools. And after you do a lecture or two, the conversation quickly pivots to how do you get a job. And one of the
Mm,
things I talk about is that, one, stop using a rear view mirror, because everyone I interview from say, they go through, I went to this school, I got this grade. And same with executives, no matter what level, the tendency is always to say, let me tell you what I did.
yeah.
Um, so that's one. But then to be really precise, because one of my favorite talks was done by a New York Times columnist, Tom Friedman, at one of these TED Talks or Aspen Institute, which I watched. And he brought this up about 4 or 5 years ago. Certainly, AI is already accelerating this, but the notion that if you're okay at anything, if you're good at many things, you can't be great at anything, and average is over. Anyone can
Yeah.
hire above average genius, above average, and so as you think of your story, you have to be ruthless and say, I'm good at many things, but what am I great at?
Hmm.
And you're better off just saying, you know, not trying to fill the bucket. Say, this is my super skill. Obviously,
Hmm.
don't use that word, and tie that to a story. And the same is true for younger people, because they are more prone just to try to rattle off the facts. They're not comfortable. They have other issues which they're not comfortable communicating
Yeah.
face to face or on a Zoom call. They'd be happier to text you their story if they're like my kids, and
Funny.
um, and so that's why they have to, you have to push them even more to rehearse. Although
Hmm.
CEOs hate to rehearse. No
Yes.
matter where you are in your career, if you're going for a job, you want to make sure it's your 15th interview, and you've rehearsed with more than your best friends who will say you're great.
Hmm.
Videotape, phone, record yourself, because the more you tell your story, it's like anything. The more you rehearse these lines, you'll get better at it.
I
And
think.
if your first interview is the job you want, that's high risk.
Yeah. I think that it's really interesting coming from a perspective of a CEO, because I media train them and do video training, like, here, because you're going to have to do videos, and a lot they're like, I got this. I do this all day. And
Yeah,
then the record hits and they're like,
yeah.
and it's
let's
so,
let's
just
start again from the
practice.
beginning. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
just
yeah, and
practice.
so yeah, it's those are my you know, and each of them is hard, because you could
Hmm.
have a great delivery, but your story is
Yeah.
not relevant, or
Right.
you could have a great story and you could freeze. You could be the deer in the headlight.
Hmm.
And so, like most marketing, it requires both a great, simple, clear strategy, story, and brilliant
Hmm.
execution. And
Yeah.
that same principle applies to whatever you do. But it's harder for people because some CEOs are in the business of selling vision and plans. And so they're very good at telling stories.
Yeah.
Lots of them are. But even
But those are
that,
the
you have
ones
to,
that really rise to the top, right? Those are the
right.
ones that
Yeah.
really stand out, that you're like, I don't know what Jedi mind trick you just did, but I'm
Mhm.
there. Like, I'm
Yeah.
I'm like, fully tell me more. And
Yeah.
that's the magic.
Right. And figuring out what's your story, because if you're not emotionally connected to the story, that's soft. We are all getting better because of how many messages are slammed at us at screening out BS.
Mhm.
And you can, whether you're seeing an ad that that's, you don't even see it anymore. And the younger you are, the better you are at screening out the noise. But, and they also have a high BS detector. And so if you're not really sincere and it's not authentic, and if you can't weave it through
Mhm.
um, the experience, my last book talked a lot about people don't share great product facts. People share experiences. I met this person, let me tell you. Tom's story about how he talked about averages over. Yeah.
Well, I
And how
mean,
do you create an experience on this interview that somebody's going to
yeah,
say, you got to meet Claire. I think she's our next CMO.
yeah. I was because you're talking about experiences, and it's why they hire actors to
Right.
show using the product and how they love the product. Because otherwise, having someone come up there and be like, "You should buy it. It's great," no one
Yeah, no one
cares.
wants to be sold anything, right? And
I
no
know.
one shares ordinary experiences. And
Hmm.
interviews, most of them, you have to go through five, like auditioning for a show,
Yeah.
until you get to the person who can belt out the song. Great, and then all of a sudden you find your person. But
Yeah.
interviews are more like a casting for a movie, and
Yeah.
and I don't think people in business realize how competitive the situation is, because
Mm.
as you go up the pyramid, even getting into a company, there are 10 people that are qualified. You know,
Hmm.
you know, 9 people that want the, 100 people that want the job. 8 people, and even in the finals, there's not a bad choice, and it's a
Hmm.
game of inches.
Yeah.
And anytime you're in a game of inches, there are more reasons you could lose it than win it,
Yeah.
and that's why it's hard.
Yeah, no, it's definitely hard. I mean, I don't think marketing is easy. So I would love your thoughts on AI and its impact on marketing, because I feel like a lot of people are just like, anyone can be like, I'm an expert in marketing. I'm an expert in whatever, and I could create posts about it. I could create all of this sort of stuff, and we talk about, you talked about the noise. This is really adding to the noise. What are your thoughts on it?
For sure, if you meet somebody that hasn't done their homework now, there's no excuse.
Yeah.
And with any minimal AI, you'll know more about the company, their challenges, their facts, their average. And there's still, you have to read it. You can't just say, "Let me check. Let me ask Claude or
Hmm.
ChatGPT." But that just gets to just knowing the answer and just having the facts. I think is becoming less and less differentiating. It used to
Yeah.
be when I did interviews 10 years ago, you could tell the person, she did her homework. She went out and looked at our product in the store. She spoke to people about it, when I worked at
Hmm.
Unilever. And she said, I said, she used Dove soap. She knew, she watched the ads. She talked to, boy, Claire did her homework. And that was a differentiator.
Hmm.
Now, you know, there'll be 100 Claires because they can all use a lot of AI to get super smart in a really focused way. And so I think
And
it's going to
post
come
about
down.
it and post
Exactly.
their thoughts.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just throwing content back.
Hmm.
So I think it's going to put more pressure on people, as I think you said in the beginning, showing that they have some perspective.
Hmm.
They can add some wisdom. They can
Yeah.
add some judgment, and not just give you 15 reasons to buy them now because you're on sale and then get 2 of you for one price.
Right.
Uh,
Or just
uh,
like why you need to, why you need this thing, or what is a personal brand or something. Because
or
again,
lean
all of
into
these.
it and say,
Yeah.
look, I use a ton of AI. In fact, we hire
Hmm.
lots of people because if you're not using AI, you're not having 10 people who are the smartest people in the room.
Right.
You have to double check it. But, before we used to do a pitch, I used to have 4 or 5 really smart team members, and they would spend a couple of days. Now I can get that in 45 seconds with a double
Right.
check in another platform. So just having the facts is no longer enough. And business is never about the problem with AI. It's a massive rearview mirror. It can tell you
Mm.
everything that hasn't.
Mm.
And innovation today, it's more than just saying, well, here's what's worked in the past. Because if you do what's worked in the past, the odds of it working in the future are
Right.
exponentially going down.
I
So
mean,
you want somebody who can sort of see from the noise
right.
and have the courage to, let the force be with them sometimes.
Yeah. No, I think, well, because I mean, the algorithms are changing just all the time. People's, attention span changes. Each new generation is different. And so, like you were saying, chat knows what happened in the past, and they can say, well, this is how it could happen in the future. And you're like, do you know? You don't.
Yeah,
You're going to need
right.
me to kind of
There's
figure
case
out,
studies, or there's
yeah.
research showing people really like brighter, whiter teeth, and you should. Yeah, all that is true. But
Hmm.
the biggest innovations, as Steve Jobs famously said, you can't ask the consumer what they want because they don't know about the iPhone. They don't know what the technology could do. You know,
Interesting. No, it's true.
and you can't ask the engineers because they're just going to give you an extra button or an extra swipe.
Right.
You really have to be a little bit like the old Jerry Seinfeld, and be a great observer of people. You ever wonder
Yes.
why Claire does this? And you have to be able to say, they're behaving this way. What might that say about people? And it's always been
Hmm.
true.
Hmm.
Consumers would, when you ask people why you buy a product, oh, it's on sale. My friend recommended. They'll never tell you the real reason half the time, that it makes me
Really?
feel great. Yeah,
Mm.
because they want to give you a rational answer. They don't want to tell you I'm buying this because we did a lot of work in the car business years ago, and you ask women why they like a car, and they say, oh, because of the handling and because of the coffee cup holder was here and the safety features. But for a while, when the SUVs first came, the real reason was because they felt more masculine in an
Mm.
SUV than a small car, where people were looking down at them. When they were in an
Hmm.
SUV, they felt more in control of the road,
Yeah.
emotionally confident,
Yeah.
and so even though Detroit was marketing SUVs as males, it had a much more powerful impact on females that didn't want to be bullied around the road by
Yes. Yeah.
mansplaining guys.
Well, as someone that grew up in Texas, I grew up in Texas, part of my childhood, and yeah, all the cars were so big, and so we always had a car. And so as soon as if I would rent an SUV or something, I was like, oh, I could see because
Right,
you'd
you're
have
a
like a
king of the road. You're in
right.
control, as
Well, yeah, because
opposed
at
to
least you're at
being
the same level as some of these trucks
right.
and things like that. Versus
It,
before, you're like, I can't see around them. Is there what's going
yeah,
on?
exactly. Anyway, but they would never tell you that because
Yeah,
people don't.
interesting.
And so even so, when you're interviewing for a job, the people interviewing you won't tell you what they're looking for. They'll say,
Yeah.
"We want to see your educational background, your sense of problem solving in the category. Have you let they'll push you to the facts. But
Hmm.
figuring out what's gonna and that gets into the culture of the company and understanding the culture of the company, which is
Hmm.
usually the GPS coordinates that people don't talk about and don't pay any
Right.
attention to because they're only looking at the performance metrics. But if you understand, and that's why it's important to talk to people to walk through the company to get a feel for the buzz,
Right.
not just go to ChatGPT and tell me 15 things about Google and why they're looking for people in
I
this area.
recently heard someone say that kind of the best speakers and the best people on video are the ones, because again, we're talking about the CEOs, they're not practicing, the ones that know what they want people to feel after
Yeah.
hearing what they've said. So that's kind of what you were talking about with the SUV thing. I don't
Right. What
know if
what's
when they
what's the
built
insight? What is this what message what is this person looking for and how can I tell a story that's going to connect to him or
that's
her?
going to
Not
understand.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's such an interesting thing because and sometimes it takes the market research to figure out like, what does this thing make you feel? Oh, interesting, didn't know that. So market research, but ultimately if you want people to feel something, the storytelling and that sort of thing is what does it, not AI generated just
Right.
bland content.
Yeah. And because AI can't figure out the culture of a place,
Mm,
and what makes people's heads are in the game. So if you can figure out, and when I worked across categories, so when you do three insurance companies, you say, what's the difference between branding one insurance company? Each of them had a different culture. Each of them had there was a different buzz
yeah.
when you went to lunch with them. And if you understand the culture, just like if you understand a consumer insight that they're not telling you,
Hmm.
so you really try to understand the culture. And that means you have to be a better listener and observer then because no one's going to you can read the culture on the values plaque, but that's yeah forget that.
Again, yeah.
Yeah,
AI
if you
generated
can,
that. No kidding.
yeah, exactly, and each of those words we're caring, yeah, considerate, yeah, it can mean 100 things,
It
but
doesn't matter if you don't live it,
right,
if it's not true,
GE,
right?
yeah, GE did a campaign when they were still GE like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, well, where they talked about we hire people, we want geeks, people who really like figuring out how to make the perfect jet engine, and the inner geek in you, we want that.
Hmm.
But that was a cultural play. And so if
Okay.
you were interviewing a GE at the time, you knew that, yeah, you could talk about all your engineering background, but
You
they
geek out,
wanted,
geek
but
out.
yeah, but if you came in, in a really black, cool, hip downtown shirt looking like
Yeah.
you're glad handling and, you know, you know, forget it. central
Yeah.
casting, is that they wanted somebody who could figure out how to fix things, not the not
So
the
wait, so
not the
so
fast
you
answer.
know a lot about, like, because I'm a former actress and I know all these like things. So did you were you in the entertainment world? Were you an actor? Like,
No, but I'll tell you a funny. I haven't told this story in a while, but when I came out of business school, I went for a job just because I want to be in New York in advertising, and I really didn't know anyone in advertising. And you get through 6 or 7 interviews where they ask you, you know, how do you segment a market? And you really you're spewing facts back in those days.
mm-hmm,
And I finally get to the CEO's office, in the big office, quite like Mad Men, with and it's 5 o'clock, and I'm ready for the next big question on how do you make great ads. And he said, "So, Alan, just a couple questions. Tell me about the last show you saw and what you loved about it, last museum you went to, or maybe the last book you read." And I had no idea. And years after, I said, "So Ken, why did you ask me these questions?" He said, "We need to hire people that are in touch with what's going on in the world, that are not
mm,
their nose is not in a computer screen looking at computer research. Our clients are in conference rooms all day. To do marketing, you have to zoom out. You have to see what's
mm-hmm,
happening in culture. And so I guess since then, I've always felt it's important to be successful in marketing. You have to go walk through Costco. You have to go,
yeah,
talk to people. You have to get out of New York City. You have to be
yeah,
in Des Moines. Uh,
right,
we used to do research at Procter and Gamble. I used to, fly out to someone's home, and we used to sit in their kitchen while they washed dishes, and they talk to us, and it was more important to watch what they were doing than what they were saying. So, to be successful, and I think if you apply that to personal branding, you're going into someone's office, you don't know anything about the person, you think but the more you could try to figure out the culture of the company, whatever you can
mm-hmm,
watch that person give some speeches on TED, or watch everything's on video now. Go to YouTube and watch the person you're interviewing do a presentation and see them being interviewed and get to know them as a person, not to play back the same
mm-hmm,
stuff that they're saying, but you'll get a good sense saying this person seems like, I can be less formal with them. I can, listen more, ask them questions, as
right,
opposed to just rattling off the 15 reasons to buy me now.
yeah. I one of the things that I love to ask in an interview, and now all my team does it. I go, so I've seen your resume, saw your website, everything's great. Tell me something about yourself that's not on the resume. It stumps people, but it
Yeah,
is
just
like
like I
it
was
tells
stumped
you
years
so
ago.
much.
Right,
Yes.
because I was totally prepared for every other question. And I realized that they were hiring human beings
Yeah.
who to be their clients' eyes and ears in the marketplace, not little smart geeks who could,
Right.
put PowerPoint decks together.
Yeah.
Uh,
It really tells you a lot, because sometimes people will just they'll go, okay, they'll be so stumped that they'll just rattle off their resume, and I'm like,
right.
not what I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell,
It's an
tell me something
interesting,
tell me something you've done out of work that's made you feel good. Or,
yeah.
so I do think, younger people particularly, they think it's all, how fast can their fingers get the answer out on their phone. And when you meet somebody younger who's really good at uh, articulating a story, it's the exception. So for
Mhm.
that generation, the one thing they need to learn is how to do more of what you learned as an actress, and less,
Yeah.
you know, getting the right answer in 7 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, Alan, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like there's so much that we've really unpacked here. If someone wanted to connect with you, where should they connect with you?
They can look me up on Alan at metaphors.com. That's the
Okay.
firm. Or I'm sure if Google's doing its work temporarily, or AI, they can probably put my name in and get to me pretty fast.
Well, we'll have those in the description box. No worry about that.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for being here. It was a really great conversation, and I feel like very informative, and it was fun. Kind of
Yeah.
really
Thanks
deep
for inviting me,
diving.
Claire. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. And thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.